All right, everybody, welcome back to the best hour of their day. Fern here. I'm actually super excited about this episode because I'm actually going to learn a lot. I think most of the CrossFit community would be very well served listening to this, because what we are going to do is we are going to pull back the curtain on a lot of the courses, their credentials, how it all works. What the hell is the difference between the level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4? And I have no better person here with me to do that than Amy Hollingsworth. And she is also an affiliate owner. So she is not only the certification program manager for CrossFit HQ, but she is an affiliate owner. And what's cool about our relationship is that we are literally on opposite coasts, but I have over the years had many of Amy's members who have made their way via the military from West Coast to East Coast who are now training at my gym, which is really, really cool. So thank you. So I'm trying to think. I've got at least 4 or 5 over the years.
That is so cool.
Yeah, it's awesome.
We love it that they're in good hands.
Well, it's always refreshing because I know coming. So Amy's husband, Dan Hollingsworth, is also on seminar staff. So I know what kind of coaching they got coming to our gym. And I know that they're going to get a very similar environment and coaching coming here. So it's always a very easy transition for those folks. But cool. So real quick, what is your background? Like, how do you become the certification program manager for an entity? Like, forget CrossFit. Like, how does that work?
Oh, that's a really interesting question, because I came about this, I think, I'm not really sure how someone would do this in a general organization, but how I did this, my background is in allied healthcare. And so I was a speech pathologist, and
Okay.
I was the rehab manager for a local hospital system. And I was responsible for 35 staff, including physical therapists, occupational therapists, speech pathologists, and I also had a physician and a nursing staff from a wound clinic.
Okay.
And part of one small aspect of my duties, I was helping my staff get their continuing education that is required for their licensure. And 1 year, the hospital wasn't doing super well, and we had all of our continuing education benefits completely slashed. So,
Oh, wow.
yeah. So my staff went from having $900 a year to put towards continuing education to zero. And I had to do a ton of research to figure out what I was going to do to help these people. And so I just started getting into the weeds about what the actual requirements were. And I learned a ton myself, even having a background in, knowing that I needed CEUs to maintain my licensure. I didn't really know a lot about the process. So I just became super focused on what things needed to happen. Mm-hmm. Long story short, because I knew so much about that process, when we were standing up to level 3, I had reached out to Nicole and said, hey, I hear you're doing this certification process, and I know a lot about continuing professional development. If there's an opportunity to become involved, I'd like to do that. And so that was kind of my entry into it, is I helped with the professional development piece of it, and then just kind of fell into the accreditation piece. And so that it kind of morphed into this whole process for me. This was back in 2012.
Oh, this was okay. So this is not recent. Yeah. Okay. Got it. Okay. Mm-hmm. I asked that because I believe Nicole's words were Amy's superpower is getting things certified.
Yeah. So I think what she said was my superpower is getting things accredited.
That's right. That's what it was. Yeah.
Yes. Exactly. And so, it somewhat fell into my lap how this all came to be. But because through that process, I just understood how to figure out how to meet a certain standard. There's a published standard. And so I want to take what we're doing and ensure that we're meeting the standard, sometimes exceeding the standard, mm-hmm. so that we can, move forward, basically.
So on that note, and feel free to talk about this at whatever level you want. Like, why was it so important about to make these courses accredited? Why should people understand that that's a big deal? Other than just I've got my level 1, and having it accredited actually does mean something versus it not being accredited?
Yeah, I think there are two levels here. One is accreditation is basically a voluntary process that an organization undertakes. So it's something we chose to do. And the reason you choose to get accredited is it's basically a validation to show the public that you're serious about having a high quality program.
Mm-hmm.
And then number two is there are certain occupational licensing organizations or governments or entities that will require that certain credentials are accredited. So we're super fortunate in our industry that we haven't gone that route yet. And I know CrossFit HQ has taken multiple steps to fight any efforts to license the fitness industry, but other organizations or other professions might not have that opportunity to choose to do that.
What's your personal thoughts on licensure in general, coming from a previous profession that did require licensing versus the fitness industry? I guess this kind of depends on your occupation, but
it is, honestly, it's a slippery slope because I came from physicians, physical therapists, like nurse, like all of those folks are licensed and by law. And I think, depending on kind of if you get really philosophical about occupational licensing, there's the thought that it's protects the public. And then there's the thought that, it's somewhat of a racket in that what it does is it provides a barrier for other people to get into the space. And so I think there has to be a balance. And what we have right now is a system that requires licensure for certain professions. And I think it's just we need to have some sort of public awareness of just kind of the whole landscape of licensing so that it doesn't get out of control.
Yeah. Is there any, I'm trying to think of how to ask this question so it makes sense. Does being accredited help in any way, shape, or form in the event licensure does hit the fitness industry?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah, because again, it's something that the government is used to looking at. If you look at the Department of Defense, you could name a whole, slew of things that they require to be accredited, whether it's occupations or whether it's programs or they accredit products. So if a part that has to go into an airplane, those types of things. I mean, the government is used to looking for that level of validation when it's looking at considering that kind of thing.
In obviously we particularly, and I say we, CrossFit doesn't really want licensure to come into the fitness industry. I know coaches is pretty adamant about that. But in the event that it did, would this kind of how or where would this put, the CrossFit trainers, whether it's level 1, level 2, level 3, in kind of a better spot in the event that starts coming down the pipe and they're just like, hey, now you have to be licensed? Does that help us in any way?
Well, it helps from the perspective of what likely would happen is licensure would say, in order to become licensed, you need to have an accredited credential.
Got it. Okay. That makes sense. The other thing and I remember reading this in a couple of the blogs that the Russells did like a while ago, that they're like the different governing bodies for accreditation. So CrossFit uses ANSI, so ANSI. But what are the other ones? I don't, sorry. Yeah, there's somebody there. So so we use ANSI, which is American National Standards Institute. Is that correct? Yeah.
Correct.
And then what's different about that one from some of the other ones?
So the other main organization that other people in the fitness industry go through is the NCCA, which, okay, now I'm going to mess this up. It's the National I should look it up for you because I don't recall what the acronym stands for. But essentially, they're a national body. So they only accredit programs in the US.
Okay.
ANSI is actually a member of the International Accreditation Forum,
Mm-hmm.
which is an international body that establishes standards. So when you're accredited by ANSI, you're accredited to an international standard.
Okay.
What's cool about that is they take subject matter experts from around the world and establish best practices.
Okay.
No problem.
No, you're good. Go ahead.
They establish standards based on, international considerations, which I think is amazing, because especially for us, because we have trainers all over the world.
Mm-hmm.
And so what we want to be able to do is take input from, what's important to other countries. And, there are always going to be considerations that people nationally wouldn't need.
Okay. So now, and then, so typically what are most, so like I'm the ones that come to mind are like the CPT or the CSCS. Like, what's different about those? Are they accredited by different bodies? Like, it's the stuff that falls under like ACSM or NSCA. Do you know what theirs are?
Yeah, they're all accredited through the NCCA.
Okay, got it. Okay. So that larger governing body is considered in the kind of, considered the ANSI, is that considered better because it's international, or is it just considered different?
Well, we would say it's better.
Yeah.
And we would say that the requirements to meet the international standards are much more rigorous and much more challenging. And so we would say it's actually easier to meet the NCCA standard, which is why more fitness organizations do that. So it's the National Commission for Certifying Agencies. That's what that stands for.
Yeah, I was like, I remember there was two different ones, and I just didn't have the information from that article on the tip of my tongue. But okay, yeah. So do you like? And the other thing I don't think people understand is how long it is to make this happen. Like how long it takes to get a program or a course accredited. Like, it's not just I submit an online application, they come back and they say you're good. It's a significant process that not only takes a long time to get online, but then takes a continuing effort to keep it accredited over the years.
Yes, I mean, it's substantial. And I think, so I came into the process, like I said, in 2012. Nicole had already done a tremendous amount of work to get this rolling. And we were finally accredited in 2015. Is that right?
That sounds right. Yeah.
I should know this off the top of my head, right?
It's been a while at this point, though. I mean, but yeah, I'm pretty sure that's right. I'm almost positive that's right, actually.
And so, the process entails, you've got to have you've got to complete a job task analysis. And that is, you survey members of the community and you find out what are the knowledge, skills, and abilities you need to do this job. And then based on that, you put together an exam blueprint. And then you have to, have people go through the examination on kind of like a beta test. And then you have to analyze that data. So, I mean, there's so many steps to the process, and not only is it a lot of time, but it's a tremendous amount of money. We're hiring testing consultants, we're hiring psychometricians, we're hiring accreditation consultants. They're auditing our work. They're telling us, hey, you need to beef up your ability to do this, this, and this. And it's real. And then also, we've got our peers from within the CrossFit community. So we had a lot of subject matter experts that came in and did the, kind of analyze the job task analysis and the exam blueprint, and then actually the process for writing the exam. That was all guided by consultants and high level professionals in the community. And it was, it was a long, arduous, really rigorous process. And so I think that, we take a lot of pride in the product we put out. It's an amazing, in the exam itself is an amazing exam, and it's no joke. I think a lot of people do it in the beginning.
No, you're good.
That's Alice.
Well, no, the reason I bring that up is because, specifically the, folks outside of the CrossFit community would give the level one specifically some flack, and they'd be like, oh, well, you take a weekend course and then take a test. To which my argument is always, well, I don't have to take any in-person instruction to become a certified strength and conditioning specialist, right? Like I can just literally, as long as I have a degree, I can register for the test and I can go take that test and I can pass or fail. So I think there's just a misunderstanding about how all of this works and how the function of all of it in the fitness industry.
Right. And that actually is a really good segue to talk about the difference between education, training, and certification.
Okay.
And just to follow up on what you just said, there's nobody on seminar staff, there's nobody from within HQ that said, once you take that level one, you know everything you need to know about being a fitness trainer, and you never need to do anything more.
No, that's like exactly that is the complete opposite of what we end the weekend with, where we say, this is literally your first step in this lifelong journey. Like you are not even close to being done. It's like in a 24-hour day, the level one is you waking up and getting out of bed. Like that is the first piece of the whole equation,
Right. Yeah. And it's kind of frustrating because, that statement, it's really kind of an ignorant statement. And the flip side of that is why it's such an important first step. And this is that it's hands-on. You are actually doing something. It's a participatory experience. And I think that's why it sets people up well for their journey in fitness training.
So explain to people what the difference between what should they know? So people are always looking for continuing education, whether it's like whether it's an actual piece of paper or a certificate or something. What should they understand about education versus training versus certification?
Okay. So education, the way I like to think about it is kind of like the overarching theoretical information. Mm-hmm. So an example of education is teaching people why it's important to squat.
Okay.
Training is, I'm going to teach you the skill to train others how to squat.
Okay.
And then certification is, I am going to assess you to determine if you've taken everything you've learned over the course of your profession and see if you can demonstrate competence.
Okay. So the level one would encompass what? So at least education and training, but I know there's a pretty definitive cutoff between a certificate versus a certification.
Correct. And so a certification, so a certificate program is much different than a certification program. And the level one and level two, like you mentioned, are certificate courses. And a certificate course means that there is a set defined learning objectives. You are provided instruction that teach to those learning objectives. And then you may or may not test to see if there's mastery of those learning objectives.
Okay, so a certificate course does not have to include a test.
Does not have to.
Got it. So that's so in that regard, the level one is going above and beyond for a certificate course.
Correct.
Got it.
And so then just some basic things about certificates is that they typically do not issue, there typically are no ongoing requirements as far as professional development, mm-hmm. but there typically are there's a validation period or a validity period.
Yeah, so like the level one, level two is 5 years.
Correct. And another really good example of that is like CPR, right? You take the training, yep. You pass the test, and in 3 or 2 years, you need to repeat that training because it's only valid for 2 years.
Yeah.
We're not saying you didn't do the training or that the training is necessarily outdated, but what we're saying is in order to keep up with a certain level of skill, then we're saying you need to repeat, like we have a revalidation system for those courses.
And I think that's important for people to understand because there are some people, and again, they just don't know what they don't know. They think that CrossFit mandates that they come back every 5 years, and CrossFit doesn't have any say-so in there. Like that is mandated in order to keep an accredited course.
Well, correct. So there's a validity period that is required. And so, and that's an industry standard.
Mm-hmm.
That's just what high quality certificate programs do, is they establish what the validity period is, and they expect that you revisit that information and along that timeline. So that's not something that we pull out of thin air.
Yeah. And I'm trying to think back at the timeline. I want to say the level 1 course, obviously it was originally not tested, and I want to say it became tested in like 2011 and then accredited in 2015. I want to say that's a very rough timeline, but I feel like
Yeah,
it's
actually,
close.
it was accredited in 2010.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
We're going on 9 years of accreditation for the level 1.
Oh, that's right. But that's when, okay, I remember, because that's when they moved away from, if I'm correct, that's when they moved away from testing and getting results.
I'm sorry,
No,
Alice interrupted us.
that's fine. I think, isn't that when they moved from testing and getting on site?
It might be. I'm not the person to quote on that.
Okay. I just remember there was like a specific period in there where your credential was no longer good, even if it was in that 5-year period.
Mm-hmm.
You had like so long to keep it, like, because they had gone through the accreditation process.
Yes, and that's exactly right. So you had, in order to have the accredited credential, you were given that time frame.
No, you're good.
UPS is at my door.
Okay. Take care of it if you need to.
Okay, hang on.
Yeah, so one of the things I think is important so timeline is important here, guys. So you need to think about, like, this has been a decade-long process and is only continuing to improve over time. So, and we're going to talk a little bit about the level 2 and the level 3, and then we'll kind of give you as much as we can about the level 4 that is coming online. So, but the level 3, I think, is 5 years old, and that is Amy's. That's kind of her swim lane. So Amy kind of governs the certification or the program. She's a manager for a program for the level 3 specifically. So we're gonna do a deep dive on level 3 in a minute. But okay. So so I think that timeline is correct, where you had like a really small window to get that, like, to get up to speed. Otherwise your credential was no longer any good. And then trying to think. So I came on staff in 2013, and that's when when a lot of the kind of revisions and oversight really started to hit hard with regard to how the course was facilitated, where like there's some really hard wickets that you have to hit with regard to presenting the course. Otherwise you could lose that accreditation.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the process is, it's yearly surveillance.
Mm-hmm.
So every year we're submitting just massive amounts of documentation to show that that we continue to meet the standard, and then assessors say, hey, these are the standards you're not meeting and you need to fix these. And so that's, it's that kind of back and forth.
And the test gets revised as well. So for anybody that's taken the level course, you remember when it gets briefed at test time, they say, hey, there are 5 test questions on here that don't count towards or against you. And so that's part of the accreditation process as well, to make sure that the questions are appropriate in that overall picture of keeping a course accredited as well. So, okay.
Yeah. So there's a standard that speaks to having a fair and reliable exam. Mm-hmm. And so we have to, that's all part of how you manage reliability, is constantly refreshing. And it's it's super hard with the level 1 because of the exposure. I mean, the hundreds of thousands of people that take that test, it keeps everybody on their toes with that whole test refresh reliability issue. But
yeah, that's why there's like verbiage in all of the, like in the test briefing, about like not discussing the test and all that stuff. And then
that's
the level 2, that's going through some changes. So that's going to change as far as that certificate. But I don't remember, is that course also accredited? I feel like I should know that, but like,
it is not.
Okay. And it's not, because that one it's a kind of a unique course. And I feel like that has a lot to do with it.
It is. So it's harder to standardize a course like the level 2 that's so, it's just a harder process. It's certainly something we've discussed, and we'll see down the road that might change. And actually, the change with the change in the new test, that also might streamline that process. But right now, I honestly don't know.
Yeah.
What the decision for that is.
So for those of you that don't know, this is not kind of secret information. This has already been released. I don't know what the timeline for that is or what the specifics are, but for the level 2, there will no longer be a test on site. There will be a test that you can take after the course. Kind of, I guess, like the easiest way to, kind of like you would take the judges course, for the open, but it would be for your level 2. So that will no longer be tested on site. They'll be tested post taking the course to get that certificate. So that's going to be a change. So it's not going back to what it was before. It's kind of like an intermediate between those two, where you used to just take the level 2 and it was more participatory than anything. But yeah, so for those of you that have not taken your level 2, the reason that one is probably, again, in my limited knowledge, more difficult to get accredited is because of the uniqueness of the course, meaning most of that is personalized feedback to the coaches that come in and take that course. So it'd be incredibly difficult to standardize individual feedback across however many tens of hundreds of thousands of athletes that are coming through the level 2 course.
Correct.
So now I want to transition. I want to get into a little bit, which is your kind of specific swim lane in this whole process, which is your baby is the level 3. So for those of you that have not sat for the level 3, it is no joke, right? It is a full-fledged 4-hour test. And if I tell people all the time, do not go into that thinking that it's going to go well. Like, it is a very difficult test. I don't know what the numbers are, but like the failure rate is not low. It's pretty significant, which I think is a testament to the test.
Yeah. And we don't actually publish the pass rate.
Yep.
I think what we're waiting for in regards to that is just a few more years of data.
Yeah.
It was accredited in the fall of 2015. The seminar staff actually took that the exam as part of the beta.
Yep.
Year before, so it's really still a pretty young exam. And so we want to make sure we've got a lot of really good data before we start putting that out to the public. But the pass rate as far as it doesn't really impact individuals per se, because whether or not someone else passed has no impact on whether the next person is going to pass, because it's not, it's based on there's an absolute cut score, and you either meet the cut score or you don't.
Can you tell, like, do you know how many people have taken it? Can you release that information? Like, how many people have actually gone through that course?
Oh, well, it's not a course. So the exam, you mean?
Sorry. Yeah. So that's a good place to start, actually. But have taken that test, and then we can talk about the difference between a course and what makes it a certification.
Okay. So, oh gosh.
If you don't know, that's fine. But
I don't know how many people have taken the exam, because the data that I get includes people who have retaken it as well. But I can tell you there are approximately 1,100, almost 1,200 people who are a level 3, a CCFT level 3. So it's a fair number of people who have the credential.
So that's that's definitely less than 1% of CrossFit trainers out there.
It is.
Yeah. Like significantly less than 1%. Because I want to say that CrossFit level 1 trainer is like something to the tune of 120 to 150, 100. Okay.
That sounds right to me as well. So yeah, I mean, if you look at percentages within the credentialed staff within CrossFit, or the credentialed professionals within CrossFit, yeah, it's a really small percentage. Of course, we'd like to see that grow, and but the reality is it's not a hey, sign up, check in the box, show up.
Yeah.
If you've got a pulse, you'll pass, and you go on your merry way. It's a serious professional credential.
Yeah. So let's talk about that. So what makes that level 3 different, right? So what's the difference between a certificate course and what now we've moved into the realm of, like, I hold a certification?
Okay. So certification means assessment of basically the breadth of a professional knowledge base. So the knowledge, skills, and abilities that you need to be a certain professional. And so it's not based on any coursework. It's not based on any specific items. It's basically this whole broad view of, do you meet a minimum level of competency to actually do this job? Mm-hmm. So it's very broad in scope.
That's why that's why I always struggle when people ask me, like, what should I study for the level 3? And I'm like, everything. It's really tough in that regard, because there's no one place. It's not like, hey, if you read through this book or this, like, it is really a very, very broad assessment of one's coaching skills in general. So like technical knowledge with regard to programming, nutrition, your visual perspicuity with regard to seeing movement, like all of that stuff.
Right. Now, but that said, there is a content outline that forms the exam blueprint, right? So, you can look at how many questions are going to be involved with coaching, or how many questions are going to be involved with classroom management, that kind of thing. And the exam questions are written to the content outline, meaning if you see a knowledge, skill, or ability that's described in the content outline, we're going to ask you a question that you should be able to apply. If you are competent in that knowledge base, you should be able to apply that knowledge and answer that question properly.
And it makes perfect sense to me. And this is where I think people get hung up, because in a lot of instances, I'm trying to, like, I couldn't give away any of the questions if I wanted to, because I don't remember, because I took it 5 years ago. But it's much less like, the answers are, it is a multiple choice test, but all of the questions require a very broad comprehension of the topic. So a lot of it is not just like, is this the right hand or the left hand, is like the most like it's like, do you understand like the overarching principle and how it would be applied in a kind of this scenario? That's what I think makes it very challenging.
Yeah, and that's exactly right. So, we also provide some online study materials. And what we say is the exam items aren't taken from the study materials. What we're providing the study materials for is, if you look at the content outline, and let's say here, let me give you an example. So content outline under programming is, you should be able to adjust programming based on performance and goals. Okay, so that's a pretty broad knowledge.
Super broad, right? Yeah.
Super broad. So maybe we have some study materials that address programming for different performance levels, different goal levels, different ability levels, those kinds of things. So the study materials are there to help you develop the ability to apply that knowledge to that particular exam item.
Yeah, the guidance I generally give people is, if you are not in an affiliate actively coaching and instructing CrossFit on almost a daily basis, you should probably not sit for that test.
Yeah, I mean, practical experience coaching is critical. It's absolutely critical. So there's just,
and I think that's so a lot of people, and I think, which is strange because we're 5 years into this, but I think people are now really starting to understand the value of the level 3, because if you kind of think about that, nobody really got it 5 years ago. They're just like, okay, cool, it's another course that CrossFit's gonna make money on, blah blah blah, which is probably not the case. But as CrossFit matures, as the affiliate community matures, as coaches mature, because realistically, like, there's still a fairly new kind of environment that we're all operating in relative to fitness, like overall. That is now a separator. Like, now people will start looking for people who have a level 3, because it is very much a clear delineation between somebody's knowledge and skill set versus the next person. And I think Nicole said this, as she does, very, very succinctly, is, absent of any other information about this person, it tells me that they know what they're talking about, right? Like, outside of the fact of, like, are they an asshole or all of that other stuff, but it does tell me that they have like a significant amount of knowledge with regard to CrossFit in its entirety.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's somewhat, it's what it speaks to is someone who's taken that next level to show that they're competent and to show that they're serious about, maintaining a professional credential that is going to insist that they have ongoing professional development and ongoing coaching hours. And it just puts them in a level of, uh, as if we were licensed.
Yeah.
They're taking that voluntary step to maintain the standard of if we were licensed while we're not.
Yeah. So on that note, so that's actually a good little like kind of pivot there, which is how does CEUs fit into this whole game? So this is not, once you take the level 3, there's kind of 2 ways you can keep their credential. One, I can do my CEUs in that time frame, but if I don't, then I would have to resit for that exam. Correct?
Correct. Yeah. So the research part of the standard is you have to have established recertification requirements, and our recertification requirements are CEUs, ongoing coaching hours, maintenance of your CPR, and CEUs. So for continuing education, CEUs is continuing education units. Some people call them credits, some people call them whatever. We call them CEUs. It basically is just a standard of measurement for hours spent in ongoing education.
So what's the hours required to maintain the credential for the
50 hours. Yeah, 50 hours every 3 years.
50 hours every 3 years. So nothing crazy. You got to get roughly 15 hours of CEUs annually in order to maintain your credential.
Correct.
And then what's the hours requirement of coaching? Do you know? I don't remember what that is actually.
300.
300. Got it. Okay. So not an incredible amount, but.
No, you want to know something interesting? When we launched the credential, it was 900.
For maintenance?
Yes.
That's more than it's required to sit for the exam.
Yeah.
Is it still, is 700 or 750?
750 if you apply through path 1.
Yeah. And 1500. Yeah. So then there's 2 paths. So talk about that. Yeah.
Yeah. So to finish that though, so we launched it at 900 hours every 3 years. And then we quickly realized that was just not sustainable. And so
that's a lot.
It is a lot. It is a lot. And so we changed that to 300. I think it's a lot more reasonable. And but there's some, if you're again holding a professional credential, there's no reason you can't maintain 100 contact hours per year of coaching. But okay, so path 1, path 2, per accreditation standards that we adhere to require that you have an alternative pathway from your own instruction. So we can't require someone to take CrossFit training in order to be eligible for this exam. So one pathway is you can get your level 1, your level 2, and then you have 750 hours of training others utilizing the CrossFit methodology. Pathway 2 is you can have 1,500 hours of strength and conditioning coaching at the collegiate or professional level. So an example of that is you're the strength coach for the baseball team at UCLA.
Okay.
Or you're the strength coach for the Seattle Seahawks.
Okay.
That type of thing.
Got it. And then those, do they still have different names? Like, wasn't one the CFL3 and then the other one was CCFT, or am I saying that right?
No, so actually, here, this is a good part of clarification as well. So the actual credential is called the CCFT, the Certified CrossFit Trainer.
Okay.
That is that acronym is the actual accredited certification.
Okay.
The level 3 is a CrossFit specific designation, and it's
Got it.
only given to people who have passed the exam coming through pathway 1.
Got it.
So if you're the strength coach and you apply via pathway 2, you don't have a CrossFit level 3.
Got it.
You just
have a CCFT. Okay.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, I thought that was interesting. And even though like somebody, like it would be interesting, like I'd be curious how many people, and you probably don't even have this information, have gone through pathway 2. Like, I just don't know. I don't know how successful you would be in sitting for that exam if you were not had not come through the the other pathway.
Yeah, it's still a pretty small number.
Mhm.
And I don't know, I haven't separated out that pass rate. But it is, I
Yeah.
think that I think there's avenues for both people to be
Yeah.
successful. Um, so,
Yeah.
but yeah, I mean, it's just part of, because can you imagine what a racket that is? You develop a certification and you say the only way you can get this is if you take all of my courses here.
Yeah, absolutely. And people would be like, yeah, you just want more of my money. And it's just
Yeah,
like that. And that would be a valid gripe.
yeah,
So when I saw that, I was like, oh, that's and 1,500 hours in the strength and conditioning. That's a significant, that's not chump
yeah,
change as far
yeah.
as like,
And the rationale behind that is, okay, so you don't have, what they ask for is some sort of equivalency. And, the reality is that that's a really tough thing to decide. But
yes.
we have a board of
Mhm.
subject matter experts that consider all of these things, and what we looked at was, well, people coming from the strength conditioning community, maybe they should have additional hours in lieu of any type of training
Mhm.
requirements. And so it is what it is. It's been reviewed, it's been approved, and here we are 5 years later, 4.5 years later.
Mhm.
But yeah, the issue is that you have to give people the opportunity to have an alternate pathway.
Mhm. The real takeaway I would really want people to walk away with is the amount of time, resources, money that CrossFit is putting behind like making this pipeline legitimate, like far
Mhm.
more legitimate than most, if not any other trainer credentials that you could have because of the requirement. I mean, somebody who has a level 1, level 2, level 3, and then we can chat a little bit about the level 4. Like
Mhm.
that is a significant journey and tells me a lot about you as a professional, which
Mhm.
is not the case if I'm just going to, like if you have the CPT, which is a certified personal trainer through ACE, I mean, you can just take that test. Like
Yeah,
that's it.
you order the book, you study the book, and you take the test.
Or you don't study and you could just don't, like I took the CS, full disclosure, I took the CSCS. I did not study 1 second for that test.
Uh-huh.
I was able to apply because I have a degree. So
Yeah.
my degree is in economics, by the way. Um, so I registered for the test. I went and took the test. So that's 2-part test. So that is, I forget what they're called. I'm going to butcher these names, but one is like basically the practical application, and the other one is like applied sciences or something of that
Yeah.
nature.
Mhm.
Breezed through the practical application and then failed the applied sciences portion because that portion of the test is very specific to the study material, which I had not
Mhm.
studied, because they
Mhm.
want very specific answers. And for somebody who's looking for a little bit more specificity on that, if they're talking about caloric needs for an athlete, like they want a specific answer based on the athletes and the parameters that they gave you, which in large part would not fall in line with what we believe would be calorically required for an athlete, and macro distribution as well. So that's the kind of stuff where I am going to sit for it and take it again, but I'm going to have to crack a book for that. So because I'm going to have to study to that test in order to pass the test.
And you actually just hit on a really important information of why licensure itself is really scary, because the potential for licensure is that there would be somebody that is not a subject matter expert making decisions about that exam question needing to be, is it their nutrition standards,
Mhm.
our nutrition standards, someone else's nutrition standards, and really what the answer should be is a nutrition standard.
Mhm.
And you know what I mean? It's kind of like having a state sponsored religion. We want our state picking one,
Yeah.
right? We want, it's like
Yeah.
religious freedom,
Yeah.
right? No matter what you believe or don't believe,
Mhm.
you get to pick, not,
Yeah.
we're not going to tell you.
So,
So
so actually, that's actually a good kind of like little mini discussion is, why should CrossFit trainers, actually forget that, trainers in general, why should they be a little bit weary of licensure in the fitness industry? Like if you want to elaborate more, a little bit more along the lines of that, what you were just kind of talking about, like why should we be worried about that?
well, you should be worried because I think traditionally the people that are driving driving that whole process have potentially their own interest in mind, where they, other drafts that we've seen in certain states have said, you need to be accredited by this body, or you need to have a credential from this organization, where they're specifying who gets to be the purveyor of our profession.
Yeah.
And that's total and utter bullshit.
Yeah. And if you want to do a deeper dive into that, I think it's Keeping Fitness Legal. Is that now the name of the blog?
I believe so.
Something like that.
Yeah,
But
I mean, those guys have covered this
at
to the extent that I could never even, summarize for you. But I mean, it's the issue is if you look at what if somebody's goal is to prevent someone else from having a share in the market, then you really need to be concerned that maybe they don't have your best interest at heart.
Yeah, and I think the big takeaway is like twofold. It's like, hey, it is somewhat of a racket to limit market competition, but more importantly, there's a confusion generally on the consumer end that having a license means that there's some sort of like specific professional development behind that person, which is
Correct.
not the case. Like in a lot of those instances, it means I just paid for the license, like without any sort of credential behind it, meaning I just have this piece of paper that means I'm licensed to do this thing. But it doesn't speak to, it's not based on professional development and qualifications reached to be at a certain level within a specific industry, which I think is the bigger takeaway, is that being licensed and the way that it's trying to come down via legislation is not going to mean that somebody is good at what they do.
Correct.
So, cool. That's a lot. So what else, if anything, should people know about level 1, level 2, or just that kind of certification process in general?
Well, I think, what I always recommend is you need to start with your goals. What are your goals, right? And if your goals are to receive the highest quality education and training, then you go and you take your level 1. Mm-hmm. If your goals are then to advance your your training, your ability to train others, and you go and you take your level 2. Mm-hmm. If your next goal is to kind of commit to a higher level of professional standard, then you decide you're going to sit for your level for the CCFT examination. And then part of that process is ongoing professional development and maintaining that certification. So, it's all about what are your goals? What do you want to do? And then you decide where to go from there.
Yeah. And then I think the burning question on a very small percentage of the population, because only those people, less than 1%, is even qualified to potentially get the follow-on kind of, the last credential would be the level 4. So we can't give you specific dates or too much on that. But I know there's always been like the level 4 has been like this myth that kind of floats around and be like, oh,
it's the unicorn, right?
Yeah, it's the unicorn. And I think it does warrant a discussion about kind of like why that has been this kind of cloud, if you will, that kind of sits up there, and because of the uniqueness of it. And if you think about certifications, credentials, to my knowledge, what CrossFit is trying to do with a level 4 has literally never been done before.
Yeah, I mean, so it's pretty epic, and we're anxious to release it. We really are. But like everything CrossFit does, we're doing it the right way. Mm-hmm. We're engaging in a process that people don't even, can't even comprehend, that goes into standing up and a credential like that. And so the level 4 is also going to be a certification, meaning it's going to have eligibility requirements. It's going to test a broad range of knowledge, skills, and abilities. It's going to have recertification requirements with ongoing professional development, all of those things. So it fits in that certification box. And so the other part of that is that we have to have a fair and reliable exam. And so
that's the part that I think is sticky, that people don't understand, is like so there's the course, but then the way Nicole was explaining it was, and I'm not going to give away anything that is super specific, but the accreditors within the organization have to go through a pretty significant kind of And when I say accreditors, mean, or assessors is probably a better word for that, have to go through a pretty nauseating process to make sure that that assessment process is pretty standardized across. Because so you can imagine, if there's whatever, we'll just use the whole CrossFit seminar staff. So let's just say there was 200 level 1 and level 2 trainers total. And then let's say you picked, I'm just making these numbers up, so don't hold me to these guys. Let's say you picked 10 of them out of there who are going to be level 4 assessors. Those 4 or those 10 people would have to have a very reliable, consistent means of assessment across the board, regardless of who they were assessing or where or what combination they were put in. So that really is the struggle, and currently that is trying to be sorted out. So
the whole evaluation development. So that we refer to the level, the CCFT as an examination. We refer to the level 4, the CCFC, as an evaluation. So for the evaluation, the evaluation has to be written, and then it has to be, like you said, the raters have to be trained to give that assessment, and then all of that piece has to be analyzed by testing consultants, psychometricians, all of that kind of stuff. And it's this continuous process, and it's like I've said, it's super rigorous and it's super time consuming. And so what we're doing is putting into play the really important steps, laying the foundation, really strong foundation for, a pretty kick-ass evaluation. It's gonna, it's going to be just kind of like, I think when the CCFT came out and people, everyone's excited and they rush into it and they're like, oh shit. It's not, I would say any certification in general that CrossFit puts out is not to be rushed into lightly. It's a serious endeavor. You have to know why you're doing it, and it's not just a check in the box. It's not just because you want a bunch of letters behind your name. It's because you take the process seriously and approach it with a little bit of respect, because
to be blunt, you need to know your shit. You need to know your shit.
Know your shit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think the frustration is people are anxious to do it. However, because the reality is, like, CrossFit could have put it together and put it on the street, and we could do this process, and we could slap level 4 on people that would, the organization deemed worthy, but it wouldn't be legitimized by an outside party, which I think is why they're taking kind of the long, slow approach to this, so that long term, 10, 15, 20 years from now, like, that credential actually means something. It's not just like, I got a sticker, it says I'm level 4,
the t-shirt, right?
Yeah. So.
Honestly, that's a really good assessment of it. And I think that one of the things that's most exciting for me is the feedback that I see, that people who undertake this process, and I have a feeling it's going to be the same. We're going to see the same feedback for the level 4.
Yep.
Is that people say, I learned so much and I grew as a coach during this process.
Yeah.
So whether even people who failed have come back and say, I failed and I'm disappointed, but I'm going to do it again because I've learned so much and I've become a better coach. So who the real winners are is the whole community, because what they're getting is more experience, more confident, more competent, and more just aware coaches out there that are really serving this community. And to me, that's pretty phenomenal.
Yeah. I can't think of a better way to end this podcast. I think that was a great summation of, like, why this process is important, why CrossFit and HQ is spending so much time trying to make sure that this, came online, stays online, and then the follow-on courses will do the same thing. So awesome. I think that was a good kind of clarification on a lot of kind of weird little misunderstandings about the whole process and the courses in general. So thank you. I learned something.
Yeah.
That was great.
Yeah. Thank you.
Absolutely. If you guys have questions about any of this stuff, just hit us up in the DM, and we'll be happy to hand those off to Amy. And like I said, like, this is kind of straight from the head shut up there about what's going on, why it is the way it is, and I think you guys should be excited. So the level 4 is coming. It's coming. It's going to happen. But if you have not taken your level 3 and you want to pursue your professional development as a coach, I highly recommend the level 3. But as Amy and I have both stated, it is not something to be taken lightly. You should spend some time with your face in a book. You should spend some time coaching athletes on the floor, and be prepared for a rigorous, test of your knowledge. So, anything else?
No, I just thanks for having me, and
Awesome.
it was great.
Listen, if I know you guys are mad because we never send any people to Washington, but nobody goes from Virginia Beach to Washington. But if they do, I'm sending in with Kitsap CrossFit. So
we appreciate that.
Awesome. If you guys have any other questions, please send them our way, and we'd be happy to get answers for you via Amy and the certification team. So awesome. Thank you so much for your time. I know you're busy, so we appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. My pleasure.
Awesome.
Thanks for listening to Best Hour of Their Day. If you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. Let me explain. First of all, it's free. How cool is that? There's a creation tool that allows you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer, so it becomes super simple. Some of these episodes with Fern or Todd or myself chatting with one another, we've done right within the app itself. Anchor will make it easy to distribute your podcast to all platforms, Spotify, Apple, and many more. And you can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. It's everything you need to make an awesome podcast in one place. All you have to do is download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started today. Come on, who doesn't have Spotify at this point? And if you were unaware, Spotify now is offering podcasts. That's right. On Spotify, you can listen to all your favorite artists, but also podcasts in one place for free. Spotify has a huge catalog of podcasts on every topic, including the one you're listening to right now, Best Hour of Their Day. On Spotify, you can follow your favorite podcasts so you never miss an episode. Premium users can even download episodes to listen to offline wherever you are, something I always do before I hop on a plane. And you can even easily share what you're listening to with your friends on Instagram and other social media platforms. Here's the deal. If you haven't done so already, be sure to download the Spotify app, search for Best Hour of Their Day on Spotify, or browse some other podcasts if you want. You can find them in your library tab. And also make sure to follow me so you never miss an episode of Best Hour of Their Day. Thanks again for listening to Best Hour of Their Day. Just a reminder, Fern and I have an amazing new show called Dropping In, premiering on our YouTube channel in early 2020. Be sure to head over to the Best Hour of Their Day YouTube channel now, subscribe so you don't miss any of the episodes. You've probably heard us talking about it, summarizing some of our trip. You can see some highlights up on our Instagram as well at Best Hour of Their Day. But I promise you, you're not going to want to miss out. So subscribe now. Thanks for everything you do. Thanks for letting us be a part of your lives. Hope you have a great rest of your day. Tune in tomorrow for another episode of Best Hour of Their Day.